England's private water companies paid out £1.4 billion in dividends to shareholders in 2022. That's more than twice what they paid out in 2021, according to analysis from the Financial Times. But profit isn't the only thing surging in England's water. There's sewage too. Tons of it. Environment Agency figures show that in 2022, there were more than 300,000 sewage spills into our lakes, rivers, and coastline. That's over 800 spills every single day. Measured consecutively, sewage poured into our waterways for nearly 1 million hours last year. It's vomit-inducing, literally. And rather than upgrading our water infrastructure to address environmental pollution, water companies are pouring our cash into overseas private equity firms and pension funds. On BBC Question Time, Tory Minister for Social Care Helen Whately told the audience what the government was doing about it.
We have been taking action. In fact, already since 2015, £141 million worth of fines have been paid by the water companies. So they are already being penalised for when there is pollution in the outflow. Yeah. We have introduced tougher fines already, building on that in legislation. We are making the water companies invest to fix this problem. Over the next 25 years, they're going to be investing the order of £56 billion to upgrade the water infrastructure.
Does the government have a view?
And money. We are determined to get them to fix it. We are taking really tough action, but it does take time.
And does the government have a view, when you say it will take time, when that might be?
Well, I just said, over the next 25 years, 56 billion years. Well, it will improve.
They can't wait 25 years to go for a swim. She wants to go in tomorrow. What's happened to this young lady?
The number I said was £56 billion over that period. It cannot be done simply overnight, as that. These problems are hard to fix.
We're politicians. We can't do anything. According to LBC's Nick Ferrari, it isn't that difficult.
I can solve this at a stroke, and let me tell you how we do it. The water company bosses are paid an average of around £1 million a year. Between the 22 or 23 of them, they bank £25 million. The profits that they make are eye-watering. The fines that are levied by the government are almost built into the business model. They don't actually care because they're making so much money. Meanwhile, people in Bexhill and Eastbourne are out there swimming in a word I won't even use, and you can't water your hydrangeas. This is the way we solve it, and it's very simple. When the government wants to, they can bring in a law overnight, like the Public Order Act, which saw 6 people with a load of banners and some rubber bands arrested and thrown in jail. This is the law that needs to come in. Any chief executive who continually allows his or her company to put raw sewage into the water, let's get this law enacted straight away, will go to jail for 5 years for corporate... Because, and one of my sons suffered from this, you can get Weil's disease, fortunately he lived, which is a killer, and they are playing with people's lives by putting sewage in the water, put them behind bars, it'll be solved overnight.
Okay.
Lock 'em up. As a famous orange man once said, who doesn't love the idea of jailing gravy train executives? I know I certainly do. But it was down to Novara Media's own Ash Sarkar to provide the careful, structural analysis that we really love her for.
Privatised water companies paid out £1.4 billion in shareholder dividends last year. And 20%...
And that's analysis by the Financial Times.
And that's analysis from the FT. And 20% of your water bill is going towards shareholder profits and managing the debt for those privatised companies. Does that seem like a good use of your money? Do you feel you're getting good value for your money? Would you rather that money was going into fixing the infrastructure?
Yes.
While these companies remain in private hands, there's no incentive for them to do it. There is simply no incentive. So Southern Water is mostly owned by an Australian investment firm, and it's partially owned by the American mega bank JP Morgan. So your water bills are going towards making foreign corporations rich, and because they are so fabulously rich, they can just eat up whatever fine the government decides to levy them with. And while it would be very satisfying to see some of these CEOs in jail, and I would love it personally, what I fear is that the incentive hasn't gone away, which is you underinvest in the infrastructure, you let it crumble because, you don't live there. You live in Manhattan or somewhere gorgeous. You don't have to worry about the sea in Bexhill. And instead, the incentive is to extract money from the system that could go towards fixing infrastructure, and you put it towards shareholder dividends. It makes financial sense at this point to bring this industry back into state control so all of the money can go towards fixing the problems. And of course, the Tories don't really want to do that. They only nationalise things at the last possible minute, as they have with the Trans-Pennine Express. But what confuses me is that Labour aren't committing to it either, when it would save so much public money. And it would mean that these problems would get fixed because you guys would be democratically accountable. You're not in Australia. You're not in Wall Street. You're right here where we can see you.
So in response, what did Labour's Thanam Debonair have to say to Ash's excellent suggestion? It's too expensive. According to her, the costs of nationalising the water companies would be astronomical. But researchers at the University of Greenwich put the cost at around £14.7 billion. That's less than 2% of the government's total tax receipts for last year. And for context, after water was privatised in the early 1990s, dividends to shareholders of parent companies amounted to £57 billion between 1991 and 2019. £57 billion. That could have paid for improvements to infrastructure and cheaper bills, heaven forbid. Michael, politicians tell people to buy a house, to buy an asset, that it's always worth investing in the future. Why don't they think the same logic applies to them and the state?
You know, in the private sector or just any ordinary individual, if you borrow 300 grand to buy a house that costs 300 grand, you're not actually any poorer, right? Because your asset is worth 300 grand. What you've borrowed is 300 grand. You're not in debt really. You're in debt to the bank, but if you wanted, you could just sell the house and pay it back, right? So you're not insolvent, let's say. Now, the only way that borrowing money to buy something would make you insolvent, buying an asset which has an income stream would make you insolvent, is if that asset was not worth very much or was going to go out of business. Now, we all have quite a lot of interest in this country in the water system not going out of business. We are always going to need water. So I think the chances that the government has to borrow some money from the financial markets to buy the water companies and then finds, oh my God, the income stream has dried up. So long as we need water, there is going to be an income stream when it comes to providing water. If it turns out that you buy the water system and then the whole thing goes bust and collapses, well, we've got bigger fish to fry than some debt to pay back because there won't be any water coming out of our taps. So the water system is a safe investment because it needs to be a goddamn safe investment because otherwise we're all dead.